Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm gonna be talking about Johnson, one of the strongest and most unique tank in the game. In this video, I will also discuss how Johnson works in full details, which includes his passive, skills, builds, emblems, along with some tips and guide on how to drive him properly. So without further ado, let's get started with the video. Johnson has remained as one of the most popular and unique tank in the game. What makes him so special and unique is his ability to transform into a car, allowing you to drive and quickly rotate around the map without much problem. But he can be extremely difficult to use, especially if you have never used him before. So in order to master Johnson, you must first understand how his skills and passive works. So let's start with his passive. With the help of his passive, whenever your HP drops below 30%, you will gain a shield that lasts for 10 seconds. The shield can absorb attacks from enemies and also from the turret. And the shield scales with your physical defense, and the more physical defense you have, the stronger your shield will be. In short, this means that acquiring physical defense items will result in a larger shield. And blade armor has the highest physical defense, so you should invest in blade armor, as it increases your shield by a lot, compared to other defense items. His passive has a similar effect to Aegis and Rose Gold, but his passive has a cooldown of 100 seconds. Now, let's talk about his first skill. With the help of his first skill, Johnson throws his wrench toward the target location, dealing 120 magic damage to enemies in its path. And enemies that get hit by this skill get stunned for 0.8 seconds. And just like your passive, the damage of this skill scales with your physical defense. Meaning the more physical defense you have, the more damage this skill will deal. This skill is very helpful when chasing the enemies, as it allows you to stun enemies for 0.8 seconds, allowing you and your teammates to catch up to them. Now, let's talk about his second skill. With the help of his second skill, Johnson raises his shield, continuously dealing 80 magic damage to enemies in a fan-shaped area in the target direction, and also slowing them by 20%. Each instance of damage also increases the enemy's subsequent damage taken from the skill by 15%. Meaning the longer you hit an enemy with this skill, the more damage it will deal. And you can also use your first skill and basic attacks when using this skill. Prioritize maxing out this skill first, as this is your main source of damage. Now, let's talk about his ultimate. With the help of his ultimate, Johnson transforms into a car, and during this stage, you can drive around the map using your joystick to turn. And after you transform into a car, one of your teammates can hop in and ride along with you. And during this car stage, you can use your second skill to boost your speed. And if you want to stop driving, then you can tap on his ultimate again and your car will immediately crash and come to a stop. And you will also come to a stop upon hitting an enemy hero, dealing 300 magic damage to enemies hit, and they will also get stunned for 0.5 seconds, creating an electrified zone at the crash location, and enemies within the electrified zone will constantly deal 60 magic damage to enemies inside the zone. And the duration of the stun when crashing onto enemies scales with the car's speed, meaning if you hit the enemies with full speed, you will deal more damage, and the enemies will also get stunned for a longer duration. But before using him, you must know a few things about his ultimate, so let's talk about the tips and guide on how to drive him properly. When using Johnson's ultimate, there are 4 things that you must know, so let's start with the first one. The first and foremost thing you must know before using Johnson is that practice matters a lot, and you must constantly keep practicing him daily before using him in a match. And you can practice his ultimate by going into the hero training mode. And once you're in the hero training mode, try to drive around the map without crashing. Remember, there are some places on the map where you won't be able to turn and drive around, so in order to avoid making mistakes in rank match, try to make mistakes in practice mode instead, because you can retry multiple times on the practice mode. Whereas in a ranked game, you will immediately get teleported to your base if you make mistakes in the rank match. Remember, practicing for 5 minutes per day will help you improve a lot. And the second thing you must know when using Johnson is that you must try to memorize the map. Memorizing the map is very important when using heroes like Johnson and Fanny. And the best way to by heart the map is by constantly practicing him in hero training mode. And the third thing you must know when using Johnson is that you must learn how to drive in circles. And there are 3 locations in the map where you can drive in circles. And those 3 locations where you can drive in circles are your base, the turtle and lord, and lastly around the blue buff. And the main reason why driving in circles is important is because whenever you use your ultimate, your location gets exposed for a few seconds, alerting the enemies and allowing them to see which way you're gonna drive, giving them a chance to retreat or hide away. But if you don't want the enemies to know which way you'll be driving when using your ultimate, then make sure to drive around your base for a few seconds. And after you drive around your base at least 3 times, the enemies will think you probably crashed or drove somewhere else, and that way, you will be able to catch the enemies off guard. And the second reason why driving in circles is important is because it will allow you to look at the map and scan the map for enemies, giving you enough time to make decisions on where to go. And you can also keep driving around your base if you don't see enemies on the map. Because most of the times, people usually crash before they are able to find the enemies. So in order to avoid that, you can drive around your base when you don't see the enemies on the map, and once the enemies are visible in the map, you can directly charge at them. And the fourth thing you must know when using Johnson is that you must never go in a straight line when you spot an enemy on the map, especially when playing against enemies with dash abilities. Instead of driving in a straight line when you see an enemy, try to go around and hit the enemies from behind, so that they won't be able to dodge your ultimate. And you can also manually stop the car if you slightly miss an enemy, and that way, the impact of your crash will still have an effect on them. Now, let's talk about his builds, battle spells, and emblems. For Johnson, you can choose your build depending on your playstyle and role, since he can be played as the damage dealer, and also as the tank. And if you want to play him as the tank, then this is the best build for him. But if you want to play him as the damage dealer, then you can also go for this build. But remember, you must only go for the damage build when the enemies have multiple squishy heroes. And if the enemies have tanky heroes, then it's better if you go for the tank build. And when you use the damage build, you must play Johnson like a hit-and-run hero, because the enemies will easily be able to melt you when going for damage build, so you must keep that in mind. And for his battle spell, you can go for Petrify when using the tank build. But if you're using the damage build, then make sure to go for Sprint as your battle spell. Now, let's talk about his emblems and talents. For his emblem, if you're going for the damage build, then you can go for the Mage emblem for more magic power. And for his talents, these are the most suitable talents when using him as the damage dealer. But if you're playing him as the tank, then make sure to go for the tank emblem to strengthen your defense. And these are the talents you can use when using him as the tank. Now, let's talk about how to use him in a match. In this video, I'm gonna be using the damage build on Johnson, but there's not a lot of difference in his gameplay even if you use him as the tank build. So let's start by talking about his early game. During the early game, you should prioritize rotating and helping out your teammates depending on the situations. In my case, I noticed that both my side laners were struggling, but I decided to support Aldous, as he was getting ganked a lot. Whereas Mia could have just hugged the tower and played safe, while waiting for me to rotate to her lane. Remember, you must always rotate to the lane that's getting ganked the most. And you must also help your jungler take the turtle whenever possible. And make sure to check the bushes near the turtle while your jungler is taking the turtle, so that the enemy's jungler won't be able to steal it. And after you finish helping your jungler take the turtle, try to rotate and continue helping your teammates until you reach level 4. And once you reach level 4, you can start driving around the map. And during the early game, you should try targeting the squishy heroes which you will be able to kill. So, your main priority during the early game should be helping your teammates, rotating around the map, and helping your jungler contest the turtle. Now let's talk about his mid-game. During the mid-game, your main priority should be targeting the enemy's mage and marksman, as they are the easiest to kill. But if you have a teammate riding with you, then you can also target the enemy's jungler and fighter. And always make sure to use your first skill to stun the enemies right after crashing on them, so that you will have higher chances of killing the enemies. And remember, heroes like Cho and Kadita can easily counter Johnson using their dash abilities, so make sure to be careful when playing against Kadita and Johnson. And when you are not using your ultimate, you should try to stay with your mage and marksman, as they are the main damage dealers of the team. So, your priority during the mid-game should be targeting their mage and marksman, and staying with your mage and marksman whenever your ultimate is on cooldown. Now, let's talk about his late game. During the late game, you must avoid riding alone, as the enemies tend to stay together, and during this stage, you will have to play very smartly, as the enemy's tank will try to make you crash onto him. So try to hit the enemies by driving around and hitting them from behind, so that they won't be able to dodge your ultimate. And remember, timing and positioning is the key to winning during the late game. And as a tank, you are the one responsible for engaging the teamfights, so always try to wait for the perfect moment to hit the enemies. And always make sure your teammates are near you before crashing onto the enemies. Because if you crash into the enemies and no one is around, then your ultimate will end up getting wasted, and you will also be sent back to your base. And whenever your teammates are taking the Lord during the late game, try to use your ultimate and drive around the Lord in circles, so that the enemies won't be able to steal the Lord. So, what do you think about Johnson? Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments. And consider liking the video if you have watched this far, and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.